All right, so everyone, welcome into a ATW After the Whistle special episode. We are delighted to be joined today by Mckenzie Coan, a former Loyola graduate and an Olympian herself. Mckenzie, thank you so much for taking the time to join Jimmy and I here today.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Yeah, we're going to dive into a lot of different topics today, but first, I just wanted to ask you right off the bat, obviously, you're a swimmer. Where did you really find like your passion and love for swimming?
Yeah, no, great question. So I'm from a really small town in Georgia, and when I was born, they didn't quite know what was going on with me. So they ran a lot of tests, and when I was 19 days old, they diagnosed me with a condition that causes brittle bones. And so right off the bat, I started physical therapy when I was literally just a couple months old. And we were having to drive 2 hours one way to get to Atlanta to go to those physical therapy appointments. So I was about 6 months old, and they recommended my parents to get me in the water, and I started aqua therapy. And as young as I can remember, it was probably like 3 or 4, and I was going to aqua therapy, and I just fell in love with it. It was like a freedom that I had truly never known before. And, at that time, I didn't realize how big of a role that the water was going to play in my life. But just immediately, even from then, remembering how free I felt, and, I was just weightless in the water, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I did not realize that that was something that you were like born with. So
Mhm.
I like one of the questions I'm wondering is like when you eventually got like
Mhm.
old enough to like start knowing things, right? Like we all say
Yeah.
like once we start knowing things in life, like how did you feel like when you had like this type of disease? Like obviously it had to make you feel some sort of way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. And I think when you're born with something like my condition, it's almost like having this extra growing pain that you've got to kind of take on and deal with, and into your younger years, into your teenage years, and your adult life. And you really learn from early on that this thing, it does not define you, but it is definitely a part of you, and it's something that you're going to deal with for the rest of your life. So I learned from early on that this was something I was going to face head on, and I had to try to make the best out of every situation I was put in. So with my condition, I break bones all the time. Well, how am I going to deal with that when something comes up? Oh, I broke a femur, I broke my back, or I broke my shoulder. Like, am I going to sit here and wallow in it? No, I'm going to figure out how to move forward and how to heal this quickly and get on with my life. So it really took my entire family and I to figure that out throughout my life. And it's something that I think has absolutely made me stronger. And I would definitely not be the person I am today without it, for sure.
No, it's great to hear that you keep like pushing forward. I mean, obviously, when you're diagnosed with any disease, but especially brittle bone disease, excuse me, when you're, it's just unfortunate that like breaking bones is just something that happens and it's kind of like out of your control. But I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you, like, what kind of pushed you through your like initial diagnosis? Like, what was your like initial reaction when you first like were diagnosed with this disease and then eventually like conquering it? Like
Yeah.
where do you find like the push like or the inspiration like that keeps you going every day knowing that you have to live with this?
Yeah, honestly, it was my parents. So when I was diagnosed, when I was 19 days old, my parents were basically delivered a death sentence for me. They were told that I would never sit, crawl, stand, walk, like I wouldn't do anything. They were told to put me in the corner and leave me alone. And that's how I was going to live life. And my parents just weren't going to accept that. They said that this child, that is not going to happen. Like, we will do everything we can to give her a great life. Like, you guys are wrong. And like, my parents literally told me that that's what they told the doctors and walked out. And I kind of love that. So we took that mentality into basically the rest of my life. Anything that I ever wanted to do, my parents supported me. And we kind of went into everything, even swimming. And I tried to play like wheelchair tennis for a little while. Like, I did track and field, like all kinds of things that, a lot of people would tell my parents, "You're crazy for letting her do that. Like, her bones break easily. Like, what's wrong with you guys?" Like, the types of things that my parents were told that I found out later on when I could understand is just so crazy and disgusting to me. But I go into everything in life with this attitude now of, yes, I understand the risk, but I'm not going to sit on the sidelines and let my life pass me by. So I think that that's really been the driving force, and it really all started with my parents.
No, that's definitely a great attitude to have towards life. I think that's something that we could say for anybody. Like, I mean, obviously you have much a harder struggle than we do, but like, like that is definitely a great way to go through life and say like, hey, I'm not going to let this define me. And obviously it's
Yeah.
worked for you. Obviously you've done very well. You made it all the way to the Olympics, right? Like there's something to be said for that. That's a great accomplishment in itself. And not just get to the Olympics, you've won at the Olympics. There is something to really be said for that. And I think that's great advice that you're just, giving us for life. I mean, I love it, honestly. Like it's very inspirational in my opinion. So
Thanks.
let's move on to like another chapter of your life. Obviously, we were talking about your childhood and how, you tried some different sports and then how you got into the water with the aqua therapy. So, I want you to think back to your time at Loyola, because obviously that's where we all went to college, right?
Yeah.
So what is like your favorite memory from like your time at Loyola? I mean, it could be something small, something big. I mean, anything. What do you think?
And before Mckenzie jumps in, I just want to mention, I feel like whenever I'm walking around campus, I always see members of the swim team. I feel like they're always just hanging out.
Oh yeah,
with
no,
each
they
other.
are everywhere. Yeah.
I just feel like compared to other sports here, I feel like the swim team has this very like tight knit bond that like not a lot of sports, like not the other ones, like they don't have it as strongly tight knit as the swim team does. I just feel like they like know each other so well. I see them always like talking about whether it's swimming or something else. I just feel like they're always spending time
I think it's
together.
because there's so many of them. That's why. I mean, I have no
Oh,
idea.
for sure, yeah.
I have no idea how many people are on a swim team. Like, I don't really know anything about like the sport of swimming. Like, obviously, I know how to swim, but that doesn't really like equate to this at all. But like, how many people are actually on the swim team? Like, general question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's actually so funny that you brought this up, because it's gotten bigger and bigger since I graduated. I feel like such a dinosaur now, but I like graduated back in 2018, and there were probably maybe like, I don't know, like 70, 80 people on the team, like upwards of that, like throughout my time. And now I think there's like 100. So the team has grown quite a bit. There's so much talent on it. And it's really funny because I actually just ran into, so I live in a building where I know a few other alumni from the swim team. And then I ran into a current swimmer last night when I was on my way to dinner. So I love that there's so many of them. And like I mean, Baltimore is like one of those cities that's like a small town. So like you run into people all the time, but it's always so nice. And honestly, it makes my heart so happy that you say that about the swimmers, because it was like that when I was there on the swim team competing as an athlete. It's just such a close, like knit group of people. And I mean, you turn to each other to get through it. Swimming is one of those sports where you do it 6 days a week. You're up for morning practice, you have doubles, you have lifts, like it's so much. So to surround yourself with friends who kind of understand that and are all going after the same common goal throughout the season is a really special thing, and it's a special bond. So that makes me very happy to hear that you see that around campus. And I just love all the swimmers. They're amazing. But thinking back on my time at Loyola, I started back in 2014. God, that makes me feel so old. But I was a freshman in 2014. And, coming all the way from Georgia up to Maryland, I was pretty nervous. I remember I was sitting in my freshman orientation, and they handed me a microphone and they were like, "Where are you from?" And I go, "Georgia." And everybody goes silent in the arena and everyone's staring at me and they're like, "Okay." So I got the question of like, "What are you doing here? Why are you here?" quite a bit. And I kind of like that. It was a little bit of uniqueness for me, I guess, that I wasn't unique enough, rolling around campus in my pink wheelchair, or actually I should say racing through campus in my pink wheelchair. One of my favorite things, it was always kind of funny, Lopo would see me and they'd be like, "We're going to issue you a speeding ticket," as I like roll by and stuff. And I always thought it was so funny. But to be honest with you, I have so many special memories from my time at Loyola, but one that sticks out in my mind. So when I went to the Rio 2016 games, I actually took a month off of like the semester. So I was coming into the semester a month late to like accommodate all like games and all the dates and everything. So I literally came from Rio back to Baltimore and jumped into the semester a month late. So everything was really crazy when I got back. I did as much work with my professors as I could beforehand, but I was still a little bit behind. So I came back, I was really stressed out. You know, it had been amazing games and kind of dealing with, they call them the post-Olympic blues a little bit. So it was kind of this question of, okay, you just went and won these gold medals, like you have all the success, but it was almost like, what are you doing with your life now? Like just this array of emotions. And I came back and Father Brown, I love Father Brown so much. He is one of my favorite people in the entire world. He arranged this event for me when I came back of getting, you know, all my friends together, the swim team together, the faculty together, and we just had this huge celebration for myself and my teammate and fellow alumna, Lissa Jalamas, and it was amazing. And it just kind of made coming back and dealing with all the stress and the pressure and everything so much easier to handle, just having all of that support and to know that I was, you know, I had so many amazing friends and was so loved at the school made a world of difference. And that to me speaks volumes about what Loyola is all about. And it makes me happy every time I think about it. So that's definitely one of my favorite Loyola memories.
Yeah, that must be nice when you're away from home or Baltimore even for a while. You're in Rio, you're in
Yeah.
a foreign country competing, and then you come back and you see that people like are celebrating your time as an athlete, and you still get that feeling that you're still loved by everyone. That must be a
Yeah.
very nice feeling to have. And as an Olympian, obviously it's tough when you travel. You're in the same place for a good amount of time, and
Yeah.
to come home and just have that warm sense of like belonging, that's just great. Um,
Yeah.
but to stick with the topic of swimming,
Yeah.
I want to mention Brian Leffler. It's Leffler, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So he is the head coach of swimming at Loyola. Obviously, he was your coach when you were here as a student. He has not only coached you at Loyola, but also at the national level with
Yes.
the U.S. Paralympic team. How would you describe the influence like he's had in your life? Like when you first met him, like what was like your initial sense, like, oh, this is like a perfect coach, and then like not just like in the pool, but like outside of the pool, like what has he meant to you as like a mentor in your life?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. First off, I have to say Brian has meant so much to me in my life and my career. He will forever be one of my greatest friends. We say he's a part of my family. Like he truly is. He has had such an impact on me as a person. But Brian and I, our start, it's actually a little bit funny. So I knew of Brian. So let's go back to 2012. So I knew of Brian when I made my first national team back in 2012. I was 15, and then a couple weeks later, I made the London 2012 team on my 16th birthday. It was absolutely amazing. And so they named the team, and we're all in this room. So when they named the USA team, they'll have everybody who was at trials sit in this room the day after the meet's over, and they'll literally just announce the team. It is the most nerve-wracking, scary thing like ever. It's just so terrifying. So they like named the team. So everybody who was on it got to stay in the room, and then we went in, we had meetings for a long time after throughout the day. And I'll never forget, like Brian was in the room, and I was like, oh my God, like Brian's one of the coaches, like he's one of the national team coaches, he's going on this trip. I was so intimidated by Brian. I was like, oh my God, like he coaches Joe Wise and he coaches all these really amazing people, like he's such an expert, like I'm so intimidated. So a couple weeks go by. So that was in June of 2012, and we left for training camp for the games in August of 2012. So we spent 2 weeks on a military base in Stuttgart, Germany, before we left to go over to London. And that was kind of to get used to the time difference and kind of all come together before we left for games. So we're at this training camp, and I remember they don't really do this now, but at the time they used to assign you coaches each day at training camp. And so it was towards the end, and I was like, a part of me was like, oh, thank God, like I haven't worked with Brian yet. Like, I think he's so scary. Like, all this is so funny for me to look back on this now. But there was one day where I elected to go to an extra training session because I needed to work on some of my dives. So I had gotten with one of the female coaches and we were working my dive at the pool, and Brian happened to be there. And she's working with me and she goes, Brian, why don't you come on over here? Like, come look at this. Like, come see if you can fix it. And I remember I looked over and I was like, oh, dear God. And like Brian came over there and like he started talking and I was like so scared, and I got up on the block and I was like, whatever you do, like don't mess this up. Like do not screw up. Like Brian is right here. And I did it perfectly. And I think part of it was obviously like Brian's like advice and everything, but also I was just like scared and praying to God that I didn't screw up in front of Brian. So I think that fear in me was alive and well, but it went so well. And so I started talking to him a little bit more like throughout Germany and the games and everything. And his athlete at the time, Joe Wise, was competing on Loyola's team, but he was also on the national team and on the London team. So he was, I want to say, a sophomore or junior at the time at Loyola. So I started talking to him about Loyola and the opportunity to swim on a Division I team, and I started talking to him about Brian and what that was like. So that's kind of how I really got to know Brian at first, and I arranged for a visit to come out there. I was going into my junior year of high school when London was over, so it was about time for me to look at colleges and figure out my next move. So I came up to Loyola the fall of my senior year, and I fell in love with it right away. I knew that that was the place for me. And we had a meeting with Brian, me and my parents, and I told them, like, this is what I want to do. These are my goals. This was 2014, but I had these goals going into Rio in 2016. And I kind of knew that if I wanted to achieve those goals, Brian was the one who was going to get me there. And I'll never forget this. He looked at me and he goes, you come here and we'll get you to where you want to go. But like, there's a big commitment here. But he said, I will get you where you want to go if you can work hard enough. And I said, let's do it. So that was kind of like just like the fairy tale beginning of it all. And when I got here for my freshman year in 2014, after the first week of full classes, like not syllabus week, but like the very first full week of classes and practices, I remember it was a Friday afternoon. I came in and I sat on my bed, like on the edge of the bed, and I literally just stared at the wall for a while. I was like, oh dear God. And I have never been so exhausted and so just worked in my entire life. And I remember staring at the wall and I go, I don't know how I'm going to do 4 years of this. Holy crap. And then I remember I took a very long nap to keep from crying. But you know, Brian, I think the best thing about him, besides being an expert like coach and just an incredible person, is that he wants his athletes to be obviously great swimmers and everything, but he more so wants them to be great people. And I think in my time at Loyola, that's what I really learned. There are very few coaches who actually care about their athletes as a human being, as opposed to just a robot. And Brian is one of those incredible people. So not only is he an amazing coach, but he's a truly amazing person. He's got an amazing family, and I just have all the respect in the world for him. And I will forever be grateful, because all my successes are as much mine as they are his, without a doubt.
I mean, that's a great story. I mean, that was a great story. I mean, talk about the stages of that, like going from the pressure of just, you know, facing him to now he's your coach in college. I mean, that's great. I mean, I don't even know what to say, but I mean, I was so entertained by that. You have no idea. You have no idea how dialed in I was. All right. So obviously you're talking about training for London, for Rio. Let's move on to the past Olympics that you dealt with. Obviously, we just had the COVID. We're still, I'll have it actually. We still have the COVID-19 pandemic going on. So talk about your training going into the 2020, which happened in 2021 Olympic.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, the last year and a half, the last 19 months, I mean, we were all talking before this, but it has felt honestly kind of like a blur the last year. But going into these games, it's interesting because in March of 2020, when everything got really bad, Brian and I, we were swimming here up until when they told us we couldn't anymore. So it was me, Brian, and a few members of the para group. We're training here, and then unfortunately, obviously we lost access to the pool, so we went to a pool down the road, the Meadowbrook pool, if anybody knows where that's at. So we were there for a little while, and then of course that pool shut down, and that was a really hard thing for me to deal with, because I realized in that moment, like, things are getting really bad and I'm going to have to leave Baltimore. And that was really scary for me, because I did not want to leave Brian. I did not want to leave Loyola, where, I was working here. I had, up until that point, I've been here since 2014. Like, I really built a life for myself here, and I loved it. I had really good training at the time. I was actually just coming off of the fall prior to that. I had a really bad fracture, and I was coming off of that, but also really great world championships the summer prior. So I had dealt with a lot, but I was coming off of this fracture, but I was swimming so well with Brian, and things were really looking up. So I had a lot of hopes and a lot of goals going into those games that year. So when it came down to it, when I knew that staying here wasn't going to be an option, that I didn't foresee any pool opportunities opening up here, I realized that I was going to have to go home to Georgia. And I'll never forget, I was standing in my living room, and I had like texted Brian that I was leaving, and I didn't know when I'd be back, obviously. And my mom, bless her soul, drove 10 hours up to pick me up so we could fit all my stuff in the car, and to drive me to Georgia, to my hometown. And bless her soul, because I stood in my living room sobbing, just like crying and trying to act like I was okay and not let her see me cry. But I just stood there, and I just cried for a while as we were packing up the car, because that's how much Loyola and being here means to me. So I went home to Georgia for about 9 months, and then, it was around October, and still realized that, or I guess like 6 months, whatever it is, I don't know, my time's all messed up, but it was like October of last year, and I realized that, I still wasn't going to have the training opportunities I needed in Baltimore, and I was really high risk for COVID, and that was before vaccines. So I actually ended up moving to Colorado for a year to train at the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center going into Tokyo. So I got out there in Colorado. We created a bubble at the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center. The only people that were there were like 12 of us from the swim team, and then a few people from random sports here and there, but maybe a total of 20 people on the entire campus, which I think can house like 600 people at a time. So it was a ghost town, but there were about 12 of us training out there, which was, it was a good environment. I loved my teammates. I was there. My best friend happens to be on the national team too. So we lived together, and that was a really great experience. We had access to a 50-meter Olympic sized pool. We had altitude, but it wasn't Baltimore, and it wasn't Loyola, and it wasn't Brian. So that was really difficult and challenging for me, but I knew that at the time it was what I needed. So I stayed out there for a year through the Tokyo Games. It was a very controlled environment, very different from what I was used to. We had COVID testing every day at one point. We were only allowed out of the training center for up to 4 hours at a time, and you had to get approved where you were going. So it was definitely a big sacrifice going into games, but I think having access to the long course was really helpful. And then having the support of my teammates was really, really great for me, in addition to being in a bubble. But, it was a challenging time, but I told myself the minute that we heard that the games weren't canceled, that it was going to be postponed, Brian was the one who told me it was confirmed. And I had this moment of, oh my God, like, what am I going to do the next year? Like, am I ever going to be back in Baltimore to train for these games? Like, how am I going to do this? So I just committed myself, whatever it takes to get to and get through these games is what I will do to be, I will do anything to be at my best. So needless to say, it was a very different and challenging year going into it. And I can't tell you how much I miss Baltimore.
So not to admit, I know this is going to sound like kind of a stupid question, but from Baltimore to when you moved to Colorado Springs,
Yeah.
were you like swimming in Georgia? Did you have a place to swim, or did you take all those months off? And if you did, I mean, how did that affect you? Obviously, I'm sure like you must have lost a lot of progress.
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. For the first 6 weeks I was home, I did not have access to any kind of water. And that was really difficult for me. And I feel like anybody who knows me knows that I do not sit still well. I do not, I have a really hard time relaxing and like doing nothing and like taking time off. It has just never been something I've been good at. Every day I go into it with, okay, like how can I get the absolute most out of this day? And it doesn't matter if it's swimming, work, different like speaking engagements, whatever it is, I'm always fully committed to whatever I'm doing. So I got home, couldn't swim for 6 weeks. It was driving me insane. So this is actually really funny, but I started doing, okay, so for swimmers, we call anything on land, like any land exercise, dry land, like that's just what it's called. So I was doing dry land and lifting weights twice a day, every day. And that made me feel better, but it still wasn't simulating like what I would have been doing in the water. So, okay, this is really funny. And you kind of have to have an imagination to like get a picture of it. I found this coffee table in my house, and it was a really short but like long coffee table. And I found this it was like, okay, so swimmers use these hand paddles that you put on, and it kind of like works your arms and fixes hand placement and everything. So you attach hand paddles to yourself. So I found some ropes. So I tied the hand paddles to them. I installed like this little screw up on the wall. So I would lay, I'm not even kidding, face first on the table and attach the paddles to my hands. And the ropes kind of had like a little, like, they were a little snug and like, it kind of had a little give to them, but I would mimic swimming freestyle, like while laying on this table. That's how desperate I got at one point. So that was the first six. I cannot tell you guys, I drove my parents crazy while I was at home working out. I cannot tell you. So that was the first 6 weeks. And then I decided to harass my parents even more since I was there. And I literally found online these pools that you can order. They're tethered pools. And I found that I could fit this tethered pool in our garage in Georgia. So I literally went to my parents, and they were probably so sick of me at this point. And I went, hey guys, like I know I've like kind of interrupted your lives and everything, but could I just do a little bit more and turn our garage into an aquatic center? Like, would you guys be okay with that? And bless my parents' hearts, because they are amazing people. The first words out of their mouth were, okay, like when can we get it here? Like full on, like totally in for it to help me, continue training for this goal and these dreams that I had. So we literally got the pool a week later delivered, and took us a week to put it together because my mom and I refused my dad's help in putting it together, and we put it together backwards the first time, like completely wrong. My dad comes outside and he's like, we're having trouble getting this part to like fit in. And my dad takes one look at it, doesn't even look at the manual, and he goes, you put it together wrong, right? And we stare at each other. It's been like 3 days of this so far. And we're like, oh my God. So we had to disassemble it and start completely over. So within about 2 weeks of getting the pool, I was finally back in water. So I was swimming up to 2-hour sessions in my garage, like with my mom out there, like helping me with intervals and stuff, but like tethered in place in this pool swimming. And when I tell you, that was actually some of the hardest training I've ever done, no joke, because you're in this like 8-foot long pool and it's not that big. So everything that you put out into it like comes back at you. So the waves don't have anywhere to go. So you're kind of just like, it felt like swimming in the ocean, but I actually think it built up my strength so much in those couple of months that I used it. So props to my parents, and just like gave me a whole new level of gratitude for being in the water. But also when I went back to the pool, like having like a normal size pool to swim in, because that is tough swimming in a tethered pool, let me tell you. But yeah, that was kind of my experience training at home in Georgia.
Yeah, that's crazy. I was glad to hear that you really had to think outside the box, because you didn't have access, obviously, to like a regular pool that you're so used to going to train.
Yeah,
It's really nice
definitely.
that you had to do that in your own garage. I think that's really cool. That's a really cool story.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, just from a broad sense, obviously, you've won medals in various stages. You've won gold medals in the Paralympics and the World
Yeah.
Championships. You've set Paralympic records. I mean, to sum it all up, you've had many great accomplishments, so far in your career. Which one do you think means the most to you personally, and why do you think that?
Yeah. Well, before I really get into it, I do have to, okay, so you guys listening, I mean, you can't see this obviously, but I have my gold and my silver medal with me today from Tokyo. So I always love being able to bring these out. It's freaking heavy, but I just think these are so cool. And you know, when you win a medal at the games, it's like, okay, it's like this crazy moment where you're like, okay, like this is really cool. Like I did it, like I reached my goal, like that's amazing. But funny enough, when you come back, you kind of have like this period in time where they just like sit like so I put mine in like a pair of socks and I just put them in a drawer somewhere, but like you don't really know what to do with them. So I kind of always tell people that they're really cool to have and they're really cool to see and everything, but the real joy in it for me is being able to share it with other people. Like I don't think that will ever get old. And through everything that I've accomplished in my career, and I'm so grateful to have accomplished the things that I did, like I look at my medals and I don't think to myself like, oh, that's the end all be all. I think it's what the medals represent and what I really get to do with them, and sharing them with hopefully the next generation that's going to go out and do the exact same thing is my favorite. There's one memory that will forever be like ingrained in my mind and really kind of made me understood what this is all about. I was in Rio and I had just come off the podium with my first medal, my first gold medal. And at those games, we had 5 minutes in the stands with our families when we would come off the podium. So I got to go upstairs and I had like, it was really funny. I had like the security detail with me and then two coaches with me also. And I had a drug tester with me because I had to go to doping right after and provide a sample. So I kind of was like traveling into the stands with this posse. And I had never won. Yeah, I had never won a gold medal before, so I don't really understand that you can't just come off of the podium with a medal, a gold medal around your neck and go into the stands and be unnoticed. So I get up there to my family and Brian's also there. So we're sharing this incredible moment, but there's people all around. And then all of a sudden I see this little girl in a pink wheelchair and she's like waving at me and like security's trying to keep people off of me. My little brother is too. Like it's kind of chaos. But I like motioned for her to come forward and she said, I can't believe I get to meet you. And she goes, like, you're the reason why I believe I can do this one day. And it was just the most amazing moment. Her mom and her had traveled all the way there to watch the games. And that to me was just the most incredible thing. And, you know, she said, because of you, I know that this is possible. And like I put my medal around her neck, and I think that's when it hit me that this is so much bigger than just going out and swimming. It's so much bigger than the medals and the records. It's really about showing what is possible to others and that you don't have to live life within limits, and you don't have to accept somebody telling you all the things that you're not going to do or you might just die. Like you don't have to accept that. And I think that is literally my favorite part of getting to go out and do this for sure.
I mean, my next question was going to be who inspires you, but I don't even need to ask that because you already know who inspires you. I mean, that's such a great story. I mean, honestly, like, especially too, you're saying like all these people are coming after you and then you motioned for her. I mean, I can't imagine what that was like, number one, for her when that happened, because obviously you have a gold medalist is motioning you over after you just watched them win. I mean, that's insane. I mean, that little girl, I mean, she must have been like starstruck. And then with you, when that happened, I can't imagine how that made you feel. I mean, like, was there a party that almost like I don't want to say cried, but I mean, it must have like really like touched your heart.
Oh yeah, I remember I had been that whole entire day was so emotional, and standing on the podium and hearing the anthem really got to me. And then I think seeing my family, because without them, I would have never been there, would have never done that. So to share that moment, I get choked up now. Like I'm getting kind of emotional just thinking about it, but it really hit me when she said that. And I realized like my greatest achievement, people, the medals are great, but people will forget the medals. They forget the times, that sort of thing. Like people will forget that, but they will never forget that the impact that you had on somebody else. And for me, that will stand as my greatest accomplishment, is hopefully impacting her life to go out and do something big. And let me tell you, the amount of times during training over the next couple of years after that, when things would get hard and I thought I was going to die during some sets. Like I would always think back to her and what she said to me and continuing on to hopefully do that for somebody else too. And I think about her sometimes. Did she go after what she wanted to achieve? Did she, dream big and not be afraid to go up and do this against these obstacles and the odds and everything? And I hope that she never lets somebody else dictate for her what she's capable of. So it's all these different things that really were the driving force after that. And I just have so much gratitude for her. Like she made such an impact on me too. And that moment, I remember that night I went back to my room and I just bawled my eyes out, like just holding my medal in my hand and thinking about what she said to me. So all in all, I think when I look back, that day will be probably my favorite swimming memory of all time, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many you could pick from, but I have a curious question before we wrap up. How much do you think that gold medal actually weighs? Because you said it's pretty heavy. So.
That's so funny that you asked that, because I posted it on my Instagram story today, and whenever I post them, I always get like a couple DMs of people like, how much does it weigh? Like, what do you think? And I honestly don't know. I was sitting here before I got on. I was just looking at it and I was like, I'm literally going to go find a scale and weigh it just to see how much it weighs. But it's got to be like a good, like 3-4 pounds. I don't know. It's like it's like a couple pounds at least. It's insane. But I actually pulled out one of my Rio medals the other night, and I had some friends over and they were like, have you compared them yet? And I was like, no, it didn't even cross my mind. But I think Tokyo is a little bit heavier than Rio. So I have to bring them both out one day when I go to something and I'm speaking to let the people decide which one's heavier.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I mean gold itself is like pretty heavy. So I mean, I don't know, I'm just curious.
Did you bite it?
I did. Yeah, that's how. Let me tell you, it's one of the best parts about winning a medal. And when you go through the media zone, you stop for pictures before you go to interviews on your way out, like off of the podium and off of the pool deck. And it's always a really fun but like kind of overwhelming moment, because all the photographers are yelling like smile and some are like bite it. And it's always so funny because my OI is actually in my teeth also. So I had dentogenesis imperfecta, which means my teeth are really brittle. So every time I go to bite it, I have to remind myself to like bite it, but do it gently, or I'm literally going to be in front of everybody and like break a tooth, like in front of the media, and like just start panicking. So that's always kind of a funny thing, but that is really fun to do after you come off.
Yeah, I would love to bite into a gold medal that I just won. That would be a great feeling.
It's a cool moment.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, well, Mckenzie, thank you so much for taking the time to join Jimmy and I today. Your insight was amazing. You completely blew us away with your answers. We dove into pretty much everything we wanted to, and you also added some great stories, from the story in Germany, from being intimidated by Brian, to setting up the pool in your garage. Yeah, it was all just great to hear, and we're really glad that you had the time to join us today.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. You guys are great. And the questions were awesome. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
The answers were awesome too.
The answers are great. Yeah, the answers are better than the questions.
Awesome. Good to hear.